Welcome to the Public Health Podcast, sorting through policy and wellness news to make some sense of what the lickin' Lannisters is going on in healthcare.
This is Healthy Schmelthy.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to Healthy Schmelthy. And who is this voice, you may be asking yourself? Who does this person think he is to have a public health podcast? Well, I'll tell you, aggressive person, aggressive listener. I have a master's of public health, and my entire career has been in healthcare and the insurance side and on the provider side. And guess what? I'm your host, Rishi B, and I created this podcast so I could sort through the misinformation out there about health, and I can help you stay healthy, maybe a little bit schmelthy. But today, I'm joined by none other than Joystick and Mouses and the Dad Chronicles' own Alex Albisu.
Hello, sir. Thanks for having me on. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, no problem. And thank you very much for joining. So I had the Joystick and Mouse, the Dad Chronicle. I want to make sure that you cover all the podcasts that you're a part of. As any other projects you have there?
Oh man, I'm always doing something. Something. But that's the life of Alex Albisu, I guess. And one of those other things is America's Next Top Podcaster, and that's something that you and I met in, and we had a ton of fun with that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we were in the same team, the Mighty Podcasteers.
Mighty Podcasteers, as I raise my hand aggressively in the air.
Yeah. Oh, no. Do you not have your joust?
No, I don't. I lost my joust. I don't know where it is. I think the dogs ran off with it or something.
The dogs. Damn okay. Dog. Make sure to kill them later.
Yeah, so we're doing a bunch of between season interviews. In fact, yours went up recently, I believe.
Right.
Which has been a ton of fun, just kind of reconnecting with everybody on that show. So yeah, you can really check out anything I do by going over to incastmedianetwork.com. I think that's really all there is to it.
Yeah. I don't want to gloss over America's Next Top Podcaster too quickly. Just for anyone who doesn't know, it's a reality show for podcasters started by Brian Ibbett and Hammond Chamberlain. And we were both contestants in that show, vying for the mighty trophy of being America's Next Top Podcaster. And I had a lot of fun in that. That was definitely something. Hey, Alex?
It was a lot of fun. I say this to a lot of people who ask me about the show. Probably one of the best experiences I've had from a podcasting profession, quote unquote, perspective, because man, I learned so much about the art and craft that I came in with a willingness to learn, and boy did I learn. I'll tell you what, it was great.
Yeah, odds are if you're listening to this, you're into podcasts and probably have your own. So especially for creators, you'll definitely get something out of the America's Next Top Podcaster. Season 1, Season 2 starting soon. So let's get into the main content for this episode. Before we do, just want to throw a shout out for the music for this episode. That comes courtesy Ramin Djawadi, none other than Game of Thrones HBO series' own music creator. Make sure you check out the soundtracks for the Game of Thrones shows. You can get them on Amazon, Spotify, all the music services. It's definitely great work background music. And just if you're trying to get amped up, Michael Phelps style, before you head into the Olympic swim room, that'll pump you up. So thank you very much, Ramin Djawadi. Sherlock's out there could have probably surmised based off of the little forward that Alex and I just gave, and then based off that song, I would hope. The content for today's episode is about Game of Thrones. Let's look back on the Game of Thrones show, which just ended recently. And why don't we take a look back at the show using a public health lens. So now that the show is done, what if we were healthcare professionals in the medieval times, in the context of Game of Thrones, using healthcare, and I have a number of scenarios here that is probably going to shock a lot of you about how healthcare was done in the medieval times. But before we do, I mean, we're talking about Game of Thrones. The show just ended. Alex, how are you feeling about the Game of Thrones show? Were you on Reddit Free Folk and whining about how everything ended? How did you feel?
No, I did not whine about it. I was happy with the ending. I thought it was fine. I enjoyed the direction it took. My one thing is that, I feel like they could have dove into a bit more detail on some things. I feel like the last episode itself could have gone on for at least like a few episodes with all the detail.
Yeah.
That they were. And are we going to throw out a spoiler warning? Are we going to just
if we could keep it spoiler free, actually, just for now.
Okay, fair enough. So, yeah, I feel like there were a lot of there was a lot of great content, a little rushed. The Battle of Winterfell was fantastic, one of my favorite episodes ever. I think that the people who are complaining online and signing petitions to redo season 8, they need to stop being a bunch of wieners and just deal with it.
Yeah.
Because you know what, this is art, guys. It's totally the creators are allowed to do what they want,
right?
And
exactly.
We as consumers have the decision to like it or not.
Yeah, and I don't know how far down the Game of Thrones rabbit hole you go, Alex, but I started with the books, and then started the show once that came out. And the way that I kind of put it is, season 8, there's never been any better reason to start reading the books if you haven't already than season 8, because I also was fine with the season, but I also thought that the quality compared to the rest of the seasons reduced a little bit and kind of left a lot of things hanging. So, if you want those hanging things to be resolved, if you want those to be attached again, then why not start reading the books if you haven't already?
Yes, take those hanging things and put a nail in them.
Put a nail in it.
A little higher so they don't hang as far down.
Yeah. I mean, has there ever been any healthcare message better than that? All right. Well, we're not quite in spoiler territory just yet, but we're fast approaching it. Oh my gosh. But the main content that I wanted to talk about is healthcare in the medieval times. And so just some quick stats for all of you. I found this from medicalnewstoday.com. The leading resource of medieval healthcare news, I'm sure.
Yes, I go there quite often.
Right. I know you're always looking up medieval healthcare.
Normally.
Why would you want modern healthcare?
Well, because, I like a little surprise in my whatever I'm going to catch next. So.
Yeah, exactly. So first up, what is the medieval times? Well, it's generally regarded as the year 476 to the year 1453. Most people during these times were rural indentured servants. I had to take a pause there for those listening very carefully before I said rural. Rural. So these rural people, their average life expectancy was 35 years old. 1 in 5 children died at birth. So we're not looking too good in the medieval times.
Well, and also, I think both of us here, we're both in our 30s, right?
Yeah.
So, we're probably about to keel over if we were back then.
Yeah, right. That's a great point. Yeah. I don't have any shame about my age. I'm 31. So yeah, I'm I'd be retiring from being a rural indentured servant at this time.
You would have hopefully many grandchildren by now.
Yeah, hopefully.
And many children, but maybe only one alive at this point, because the average life expectancy of children is low, and 1 in 5 children die at birth. It's crazy.
Yeah. And just for a quick comparison, for America as of 2015, per childmortality.org, the average life expectancy right now is 78 for all people, not just men or women or something like that. That's just the overall average, 78 years old. And 6 children die per every 1,000 births. So we're looking a lot better now. Thank you, medieval people, for your sacrifice so that Alex and I could be talking here today and not about to keel over.
Yeah. And well, let me say this too, because I have a daughter. I have a 2-year-old daughter, and just being in the hospital room where my wife Deanna was giving birth, and to see the sheer discipline and the overall overwhelming level of awesome, I guess that's the right measurement of the nurses and the doctors and everything during that procedure, it was mind blowing. So we've come a long way, absolutely, and I think specifically for Arya, we had a situation where she had a really, really long umbilical cord. It was one of the longest that they've ever seen.
Wow.
So, but with that, as she was coming through the birth canal and she was starting to come out, I was getting ready to see my daughter come out, and I see the doctor go, "Oh my gosh, the umbilical cord is wrapped around her neck." And I'm like, "Oh, Jesus Christ, here we go."
Wow.
So it was actually wrapped around her neck 3 times.
Wow.
And in the mat, and she was kind of turning blue, man. There wasn't really a whole lot of opportunity for her to start breathing with this thing kind of strangling her.
Yeah.
And so it felt like it was like a snap of the finger. All of a sudden, the doctor was able to, with one extra push from Deanna, pull Arya out, unravel the umbilical cord, and cut it all with it felt like 2 seconds.
Wow.
Absolutely crazy. And then they immediately took Arya over to, the table to make sure she was okay. We heard the crying. She was fine. Thank God. But that sort of training, allowed it so that Arya didn't get suffocated as she was coming out.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible, Alex. Thank you for sharing that. That's really crazy. And a great point too, for a lot of problems that we have with just different aspects. We'll just keep with healthcare for now. There's a lot of problems, a lot of things that we need to figure out, but we've come a very, very far away from where we were in the medieval times. I'm sure a much too long umbilical cord probably would have been a stumper, back at this time.
Oh yeah. I could only imagine them being having to figure out how to unwind it and trying to cut it with whatever dull instrument that they had. And
yeah,
those things are tough, man. Those things are hard to cut. I didn't even have an opportunity to do it. I was ready to do it, but because of the situation, they were like, "Nope, we got to get her out. We got to and I was like, "Yeah, do what you got to do, man," or gal, because it was a woman doctor.
Okay. A
lot of really strong women that helped Deanna through that process. So
wow.
Again, thank you to all the nurses, doctors, whoever is listening to this, for what you do.
So, spoiler warning, and I don't have a sound tag, unfortunately. Whoop, 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 whoop.
Whoop. Wait, maybe this? Spoilers.
Wow, that's fantastic.
That?
I'm holding on to that for later.
Okay, you're welcome to.
So, okay, now we're gonna talk about anything. So, if you haven't watched Game of Thrones on HBO, there's going to be quite a bit of things that you're not going to want to hear. I'll tell you that right now. So here we go. Let's go head first into healthcare during the medieval times, and we'll start with the first topic.
Help! I'm freezing 1,000 years before the Canada Goose Company is formed.
So let's start with the Night's Watch, everyone's favorite, the Crows. So Jon Snow joined the Night's Watch, and he took the Black and went north to the Wall. The Wall is a 300-mile-long structure that runs across the northern border of the Seven Kingdoms. Little trivia, founded 8,000 years ago, before the events of A Song of Ice and Fire. During the very first war with the White Walkers, the OG White Walkers, for those of you who keep track. Yeah. The Tupac and Notorious B.I.G. of the White Walkers. And that was built by the original Bran Stark, known as Bran the Builder.
How are we going to stop that? Shot 20 arrows in him already. You heard, John. We hold the gate. Jon Snow's not no commander. We hold the gate. Mother, save me. Father, save me. The gods aren't down here. It's the six of us, you hear me? Please. Night gathers. Now my watch begins. It shall not end until my death. I shall take no wife, hold no lands, father no children. I shall wear no crowns and win no glory. I shall live and die by my post. I am the sword in the darkness. I am the watcher on the walls. I am the shield. The guards surround the bed. I place my life. I know that the night's watch. For this night and all the nights to come.
Okay, so that was the Night's Watch. We're talking about our oath once we take the black.
Would you take black? Would you do that?
That'd be tough. I've been thinking about this a lot. Who would I be in the medieval times? And I think I wouldn't last really long, so I probably would take the black. Just
So you're what, Samwell?
Yeah, I'm totally a Samwell. My brother is totally much cooler than me. Well, how about yourself?
I never gave that much thought. Like, I feel okay. Like, ideally, it would be cool to be Jon Snow. You're got everybody loves you. You're a Targaryen, and you had no idea.
Yeah.
You have this white wolf or whatever. It's kind of weird that you're banging your aunt, but other than that, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
I don't know. Tyrion has. There's something that I really love about Tyrion, and everybody talks about how Tyrion is like the main character of Game of Thrones because he actually shows up more than any other character throughout the series.
Right.
He has the most screen time, and the one thing that I love about Tyrion is how quick-witted he is. Whether his smaller stature is one thing, but he really makes up for his lack of strength in that regard to his ability to just make it happen. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like that to me is so cool, and I love that. Also, his love of wine. Other alcoholic beverages matches mine. So,
and that's a perfect segue, Alex, because I mean, during the winter times in the winter time in the medieval, in the Middle Ages, you were pretty much SOL. If you were rich, and this is actually probably generally the overall theme. If you're rich, you're doing well. Although there wasn't really indoor heating at this time. So, the best you could do is have really well-made, winter clothes, but shoes, just in general, shoes were a luxury. So, my recommendation to all of you, if you find yourself in the winter in the medieval times, is be born in ancient India, like my ancestor was. Next up,
help! I'm not a man, and no one has any idea what to do about it.
Yeah, this is really crazy.
I'm actually a man for the record, but I just wanted to make that clear, just in case there was confusion.
Yeah, thank you. I think there was a lot of confusion, actually.
I thought so too.
So I don't think there's any moment that speaks of women's health in Game of Thrones more than this guy that they ran into when Jon Snow was part of the Night's Watch. They took a little mission up north, forgetting specifically for what. I think there was some mission involving White Walkers that they were researching or something like that. But they stayed at a guy's house. His name is Craster, and he was a wildling that's in charge of Craster's Keep in the lands beyond the wall. and he was a friend of the Night's Watch, but a very tenuous ally, and he would offer sanctuary to the keep at his keep as long as no one looks at one of his 19 wives, some of whom were his daughters. Man, I don't know if you remember this part.
I do. No, I do. I was like, what is this, man?
Yeah. And my wife is actually very slowly making her way through Game of Thrones, and we just watched this episode, and really? Man, it still makes me cringe.
So bad. So gross.
Bad. And just in general connection to the story, he would sacrifice any of his sons that were born, and he'd give them to the Night King, which led to the Night King's army. And here we go with a little bit of Craster voicing his displeasure at the Crows, led by Jeor Mormont at the time.
He said he planned his stop here on his way to the Frostfangs.
People make all sorts of plans. I haven't seen Benjamin Stark in 3 years. I haven't missed him. Always treated me like scum. Haven't had any good wine for a long time. You Southerners make good wine. I'll give you that.
We're not Southerners.
Who's this little girl? You're prettier than half my daughters. You got a nice wet twat between your legs. What's your name?
Jon Snow.
Snow. Now listen to me, bastard. All you lot from south of the wall. You Southerners. But now you're in the north. The real north.
Lad meant no harm.
Oh, Jeor, you're so crazy.
So crazy. You go pray, as the great Kanye West would say.
Oh, yeah, of course. He would also say, huh? Huh? Okay, so let's dig in, Alex. This is going to be kind of a wild ride. So, for women's health during the medieval times, it's not looking too good. Per a study published by the University of Chicago, and by the way, I'll have links to all the articles I use for the content here on the show notes for this episode. But pretty much healthcare was provided by midwives, and they were supposed to only assist in childbirth, but that expanded as women's issues were just generally ignored. It was, stop whining about it. That was pretty much it. And nothing spoke more of this than an excerpt I found from an essay written by an acclaimed medieval midwife, Trotula.
Since then, women are by nature weaker than men. It is reasonable that sicknesses more often abound in them, especially around the organs involved in the work of nature. Since these organs happen to be in a retired location, women on account of their modesty and the fragility and delicacy of the state of these parts, dare not reveal these difficulties of their sicknesses to a male doctor. Wherefore I, pitying their misfortunes, and at the instigation of a certain matron, began to study carefully the sicknesses which most frequently trouble the female sex.
Yeah, so that's pretty gnarly.
God, these people, man.
And that's a renowned midwife. She's writing that herself. So yeah, women were just thought to be weak, and really they were just there for childbirth as far from the healthcare perspective. And I mean, nothing shows this more than the problem of menstruation. So there's little bits here about male practitioners who made up most practitioners just being stumped by the whole thing, and they called it suffocation of the uterus. And their great idea at the time was to treat suffocation of the uterus with drinks, steam baths, and get this, ladies, manual manipulation.
Oh. So when I think manual manipulation, a lot of things kind of come to mind, and none of it looks fun. So.
No, there's definitely no fun happening there.
Unless suffocation of the uterus is probably one of the worst phrases I've ever heard in my life.
That's actually my band name, so you take that back, sir. All right, well, women, big shout out. We're at a much better place, but man, let's just be thankful that we're tweeting about abortion bills now. We're in a better place now.
Oh yeah, especially young women.
Yeah. All right. Well, Alex, I can't think of any segue to get out of this hole. So let's just get on to the next segment.
Well, help! My son only says one word, and I have no idea what he's saying.
Oh, that could only be our favorite guy, Hodor. Hodor, originally named Willis, was a simple-minded servant of House Stark in Winterfell, working in the stables. Ah, who doesn't love a good Hodor, huh?
Hodor.
Hodor is from the phrase, hold the door, as we now know. I think that was season 5 or 6. And these were the words that Hodor heard during a seizure that mentally disabled him as a result of a future Bran Stark accidentally warging into Hodor's young self during a vision. And we have a clip here of Bran first realizing he can warg into Hodor. And here we go. They're locked in a tower and they're trying to stay quiet. And there's a thunderstorm that's scaring Hodor.
Hodor!
Quiet, Hodor.
Hodor!
Make him shut up if they hear us.
Hush, Hodor. No more Hodor.
Hodor! Hodor!
Hodor, calm down.
Hodor!
Keep
They're
quiet.
gonna hear us.
Hodor!
Hodor, calm down.
Hodor!
Hodor, be
Hodor!
quiet.
Hodor!
All right. Well, that's Hodor. And we warged into him to help Hodor. But how about the Hodors in reality? For real. Well, mental health in medieval times isn't a whole lot better than it was for women. This is an article I found from abouthistory.com. The cruel way people with mental handicaps were treated in the Middle Ages will make your stomach turn. Yeah, that's just good journalism.
Oh yeah.
So mental health was actually just kind of a lull for the providers of this time. Because a lot of healthcare and just health practice was related to religion and to spirituality. So basically these complicated disorders that were part of the brain were all just kind of like demon illnesses. And, Europe didn't have universities until very late in the medieval times. And even then, when the universities were starting to pop up, doctors were still pretty rare. So you were looking at local wise women or witches to help you, or as previously mentioned, midwives. But, midwives were, specialized in childbirth. So,
right.
If you had a child just saying Hodor, here's what they would do. Here was the big fix for a lot of mental health disorders. Something called a trephine, which is a small circular saw with a center pin mounted on a strong hollow metal shaft, to which is attached a transverse handle used in surgery to remove circular discs of bone from the skull.
Yeah, that sounds like it would do the trick. Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Hey, Doc, I have this headache.
Yeah, can you prescribe me a trephine? I need one of these things to drill a hole in my head.
Hey, Doc, my wife keeps whining at me. Can I get one of those trephines?
Here's a trephine for you. Just make sure you give this to her twice a day for the next 7 days.
Wives, right?
Right?
Yeah, so trephine was a common cure for migraines and skull fractures. Skull fractures actually, I guess, kind of makes sense. But the idea with these trephines, which had a little small saw in it, was you poke a little hole and that will let the evil spirits come out. So, not a lot of good times happening for mental health patients at this time.
Not a good time at all, man. That's scary.
Yeah. And going back to an earlier comment, actually, about what we could have learned had Christians and Muslims hugged each other instead of fought each other. I saw an interesting note about ancient Egypt during this time, and they also had a lot of superstitious thoughts about different ailments and things of that nature. But their fix was to re-engage the mentally ill back into society. So they saw it as, some kind of social disorder, basically. Like, oh, we just need to calm them down and remind you about the joys of life, which I thought was kind of sweet in a way.
Yeah, it's a less brute force way of dealing with it.
Yeah.
Help, an entire wedding party was murdered in my banquet hall, and I don't know who's going to clean any of this up.
Okay, so everyone's favorite wedding. I mean, in any TV show, it has to be, in any viewable format, has to be the Red Wedding episode. I mean,
it was wild.
Yeah.
Still to this day, one of the most traumatic things I've ever seen on TV.
Oh, man. Dude. And Ned Stark being killed at the end of book 1 and the Red Wedding. Man, reading those in the books, I was like, bro, are you kidding me right now?
No.
Yeah. Oh.
Well, and specifically, so I very, very specifically remember Ned being killed and Deanna and I sitting there because they hadn't really gone and like killed a bunch of people in season 1 like they did throughout the rest of the show.
Right.
And so I remember looking at Deanna, I was like, wait, did that just happen?
Yeah.
Is that how this is going to go? And then, yep, that's how it went the rest of the time. It was a great journey.
Oh, man. And my wife, who I mentioned, is a little bit behind. She, man, I don't think she went to bed that night when she saw that. She was just like, wait, seriously? Ned's dead? Yeah.
Oh, it's so sad.
Yeah. But, Red Wedding also is up there in the shock factor. So, just as a little bit of a refresher, Catelyn Stark, the matriarch of of Winterfell, has persuaded the then major player for the throne, Robb Stark, to form an alliance with Lord Walder Frey for an assault on the home of the Lannisters, Casterly Rock. So Catelyn, Robb, and their army go to dinner with the Freys, and preceding all this, Robb had broken a vow to Lord Frey to marry one of his daughters. And, Lord Frey, I don't think he really took this very well.
Yeah, I don't think he did.
Your Grace. I feel I've been remiss in my duties. I've given you meat and wine and music, but I haven't shown you the hospitality you deserve. My king has married, and I owe my new queen a wedding gift.
Yeah, so that clip was beginning with a speech from Lord Frey, and the woman's voice that you heard there is Catelyn Stark, realizing that something's gone terribly wrong. And those stabbing sounds were Robb Stark's, the woman that he was going to marry, and was pregnant with his child, Talissa Maegor, who's a healer from the Westerlands. So I thought I'd use the Red Wedding. I was actually kind of curious about how things got cleaned up during this time. Like, did we just use the equivalent of Middle Ages Febreze and just put it over? I don't imagine there was a lot of scrubbing going on during this time.
Little known fact: Febreze, the original recipe for Febreze was found from a book from 1382. No, I don't know.
I thought you were serious. Wow, that was really well done.
That was convincing. Was it convincing?
Yeah. Wow. We should do a Planes, Trains, and Automobiles remake where you're the Steve Martin straight man, and I'll be the John Candy.
Say the word. I'm in.
All right, so we have an article here just about general cleanliness. This is an About History article called "Healthy and Hygiene in the Medieval Ages Will Surprise You." And one thing I thought was interesting that a lot of people died during the plagues. I think that's very well known that the plagues, in the Dark Ages, there was a lot of death and a lot of problems happening during that time. One thing I didn't really think, though, was the aftermath of the plagues would lead to a general concern for cleanliness. And Alex and I were kind of talking about this before the show. We were both surprised to find out that Vikings were the best at pillaging and also personal hygiene.
Not only are they good at a lot of killing, but afterwards they're like, you know what, guys? Does anybody feel like they just need to take a shower, get all this off? Like, yeah. And then the other guy looks at, I got a chunk of blood like stuck in my ear. Need to really get that out. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I need to dunk my head in the local fjord and the local river. Your presentation spoke a lot about your rank in the Viking society. So, yeah.
Yeah, for a group of like seafaring folk who I'm sure didn't really have access to a lot of, things that could help with the hygiene piece. That was super surprising to me. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, Scandinavian countries had it going on. But then over in the West, in the Europes and the UKs and the Frances, peasants were using wells. And they would actually clean their hands before eating. And they would bathe occasionally when the smell became too strong. So, they were doing stuff during these times. I don't know how good they were doing it, but the rich people had stone and clay flooring, and poor people used straw to cover stuff, and they would use herbs on the straw, and that would cover smells. And then after the plague, wood flooring became much more widespread, so there were some public health grievances that allowed a general outpouring of all these things that rich people had at one time. And then an interesting tidbit going back to the Crusades and the Christians and the Muslims who chose not to hug each other. The Knights Templar from Poland, they brought soap back from the Crusades from the Middle East. So they torched everything, got rid of all the scientific evidence, but they were like, hey, what's this little white bar here? We should take this back. That's really cool.
Did you think they tried eating it first and they were like, this looks like food? Nope, not food, everybody.
Oh, yeah, for sure. There was probably a moment where they bit into it and then, like in the cartoons when someone is biting soap, they start hiccuping in bubbles. Like I imagine that was happening.
Oh, yeah.
So they were ahead of the times in some ways, but then, in some other ways, they really weren't, as previously mentioned with mental health and women's health. And then for dental care... This is just fantastic. This is all in the same article, by the way. So they're trying to impress upon me and Alex about how good healthcare was in the medieval ages. But then for dental care, most people to get rid of teeth, they just got a punch in the face.
Yeah. Like, did they not think that? I don't know. Like, you have to think about the context, right? Like, because we grew up seeing all these movies and videos of people getting their teeth, yanked out, like tying the string to the tooth and then slamming the door with the other side of the string tied to it. But they didn't really have any of that. Like, how else did they know that they could easily and effectively get that out?
If at this point you're punching people in the face, why wouldn't you tie a string? Like, why was that?
Right. Like, why wouldn't you try something a little less rude? But hey, Vikings, everybody.
So I guess now that we could do spoilers, I think we're both in agreement, Alex, that there was a lot of loopholes that were left out that we would have enjoyed being covered in season 8, but otherwise it was fine, right?
Yeah, I thought it was fine. And if you're listening to this and you're one of those people that's signing a petition, just don't be a wiener. Come on.
Just stop.
Yeah, just stop it. It's okay. It's okay for something to not fall into your expectation. It is what it is. But no, I enjoyed it. Definitely think that there could have been more. I definitely want to see an Arya the Explorer spinoff.
Oh, I love that.
Arya the sort of show. That would be great. Arya, you were supposed to be the Azor Ahai explorer. Yes. So yeah, it was fun though. It was a fun ride. Looking forward to the next thing, which is going to be the prequel sort of bit.
I don't know if I had to look to the books for this, but I thought it was really interesting all of a sudden that in that very last episode when Jon kills Daenerys, the dragon whose name I don't recall flies down. Dragon.
Drogon. With an
Drogon,
O.
sorry, yeah.
Yep.
And then almost very sentiently burns down the Iron Throne chair.
Oh, so great.
Which was a great scene visually, but it just seemed like a random moment of clarity and, mental power from these dragons, which before were kind of voice and command fire breathers.
Yeah.
So, stuff like that. I hope we get a little bit more explanation.
Yeah, like I thought it was so. It was kind of like, you guys keep fighting over this damn thing. Nobody can have it. It was kind of Drogon asserting that, look, nobody's going to get this.
I'm taking this way. I will turn this car around. Damn it.
Something that was kind of cool. Somebody told me kind of. I'm trying to remember when I heard this, but somebody said, "Oh, when it was at the end of the Battle of Winterfell and Arya kills the Night King." Earlier on in the series, somebody asked, "Okay, but who's going to kill the Night King?" And somebody said, "No one." And then you realize, oh, Arya's no one. Like a girl has no name, and that was kind of neat. I was like, wow, who would have? I wonder if that was purposeful or what. It's mind blown when somebody told me that.
Interesting. I'd like to think that that much thought was put. Some of the complaints that I kind of agree with was that it seemed like the main two creators had kind of checked out from the season 8, and so let's go ahead and say that they put some forethought.
Yeah, I mean, and what was the other thing? The Crow sitting on the throne in the season 1. Did you see that? Like the picture of Ned Stark sitting on the throne. On the arm of the throne is a crow.
Oh no, I didn't see that.
So, yeah, it's foreshadowing that a crow and a Stark was going to be on the throne. It's kind of neat.
Okay. And so that was the reason we had Bran warging into the crows randomly during that battle. Okay. Yep. Just reminding all of us. Okay.
Okay, that's going to do it for the Game of Thrones discussion, but before we go, I spoke to your doctor, and they said that you could use a dose of some good news.
Good news, everyone!
All right. And so our friend Alex here has been very helpful in coming in today with a very positive story.
Yeah, so just to put a little bit of context around this, my job kind of takes me around. I've been doing a bit of travel lately. We went to a conference my company put on around delivering, really powerful customer experiences. So we work with a plethora of customers who we empower to deliver customer experiences. And one of those customers is the Crisis Services of Canada. So at the sessions yesterday, I just got home from a trip, and I heard this story yesterday, and it really resonated for this segment. So I wanted to share it. It was about a woman who decided, she was feeling depressed. She had thoughts of suicide, and she ended up feeling so concerned about it that she ended up going to a hospital. She's from Canada. She went up to a hospital, a local one, in her neighborhood, and she ended up sitting down in the waiting room. And really, I guess it was pretty evident that something was wrong with her. There was a gentleman there who was providing some direction as far as, hey, he was a volunteer, right? Like, he wasn't somebody that was working at the hospital as a doctor or a nurse or something. He was an elderly man, and he ended up seeing her sitting by herself and stopped everything he was doing and just sat down and had a moment with her, just connected with her. And she said that specific moment is what kept her from committing suicide. In the spirit of mental health and knowing what this podcast is about, I wanted to share that, this person was so inspired by that. Now she works as one of the top the top folks over at Canada Suicide Prevention Service. It is a wonderful charity, and what they offer is tremendously helpful. The statistics that they were sharing were amazing about how they've stopped in progress suicides through the services that they offer. So I think a lesson learned is, you see somebody who looks like they're having a bad day, take a moment to connect with them. I think that that's a really powerful thing that takes very little effort and could potentially save somebody's life.
That's an amazing story. I love that. And that was a volunteer who did that. That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's something, not to segue too much, but that's something I'm struggling with. I'm finding is staying present, just seeing a person and just getting rid of all my BS for a moment to, kind of talk to someone else about their BS. Probably should have put it that way, but just talk to someone about their life.
No, I know what you mean.
And that's just so powerful. And from a volunteer, nonetheless. I've volunteered at a couple of hospitals, and volunteers primarily get jobs about like moving people from one side of a hospital to another and things of that nature, or helping patients out after they've been in the hospital for a long time. So they fall very far below the totem pole, but that's just great that this gentleman took that upon himself to just kind of have a heart-to-heart and just have a human connection for someone clearly in need.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
And I actually want to emphasize something that you said. Taking a moment to really be present in the moment is extremely powerful. I've been doing that myself, just trying to, so there's somebody that I work with, and we go through some exercises every once in a while when we're all meeting together. And one of them is just a check-in. And what we do is we share in the moment, what are we feeling about whatever topic that we're going to be talking about. And that's a really good sort of mental practice, is to take a second when you're realizing, if I can stop what I'm doing right now, let me notice the way I'm sitting. Let me notice the way I'm breathing. What are the thoughts that are going through my head? What does my posture look like in general? And how is that perhaps sending a message to everybody else? And then when you're more aware of yourself in that moment, you're able to really reflect and be able to see what's happening around you and be able to respond appropriately. So I think that's a really powerful thing to be able to do, but man, it's hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks so much, Alex, for bringing that great story and for joining me to chat Game of Thrones, how to clean up after weddings, and how we can manually manipulate the ladies. How about you let the fine folks at home know where they can find you?
Oh, yeah, sure. So you can find anything I do at incastmedianetwork.com. I host a video game podcast called Joystick and Mouse. I have a fatherhood podcast sharing stories of fatherhood and parenting advice over at thedadchronicle.com. You can also check out America's Next Top Podcaster, the show that Richie and I met on, over at americasnexttopodcaster.com. And finally, if you'd like to follow me on social media, you can do so by just on any of the social medias. Go to @Alex Albisu. My last name is spelled A-L, B as in boy, I-S as in Sam, U. And thanks for having me on. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah. And thank you so much for coming on. And show notes for this episode can be found at rishib.com. And make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Email me anything that you have, Game of Thrones or medieval times. If you're a woman during the medieval times, email me. I'll help consult you. That's therishib@gmail.com. And make sure, folks, wash your hands, stay healthy, and most of all, stay schmelthy.